What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Gsluke here with some Monday Night Football action between the Steelers and the Colts. Bias aside, I think this game might be a little bit more interesting than a lot of people out there think. And even if you're not into the Steelers' close football games on a Monday night, you've got DFS contests to go out there and try and take down. So there'll be one way to get engaged or the other. But you guys know I'm a huge Steeler fan, and honestly, fandom aside, I really think this is a solid spot for the Steelers. They obviously still have their head coach. They're trending in the right direction offensively, and now have TJ Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick back. So if you're looking for a live dog, perhaps even a moneyline bet, the Steelers are certainly getting a lot of attention from sharp bettors out there. I've seen quite a few people throughout the industry that I respect backing the Steelers, and a lot of the heavy money in Vegas is on the Pittsburgh side of things. So hey, there's a little bit to that. And then, of course, you add in my bias and fandom there, and I'm going to be all in on the Steelers. So what we're going to do in this video, though, is break down what to expect from the Showdown slate. We'll go through my projections, a few of the injuries to keep an eye on, my player pool as of right now, and consider some of the strategy and lineup construction side of things when it comes to some of the larger field contests. And by the end, you should be an expert of what to expect for tonight, and be ready to make some of your lineups yourself. So with a lot to talk about, no more dilly-dallying needed. Let's go ahead and hop on in. Alrighty, we've got our projections up, and I guess we'll start with the game script and, of course, the injury side of things. So with the game script, a lower 40s in terms of your point total has moved a little bit across the board depending on what book you're looking at, but still they agree low 40s and a 2.5 point spread towards the Colts. They're getting the hometown bias, and really when you're looking at just a pure talent standpoint, these teams are almost on even playing ground. You have one team still with their head coach Mike Tomlin, a young rookie quarterback, and the other side of things, the Indianapolis Colts were an absolute dumpster fire about a month ago, but with Jeff Saturday, mushed into the team, they just threw him in there without any sort of experience, has given them a little bit of an edge, a spark over the last 2 to 3 weeks. So I do think that there's something to that, but we have to remember the Colts are still, a well below average team this year. And while the Steelers aren't a juggernaut by any means, they've gotten a lot better over the last few weeks. The offense is starting to post points. 30 points against the Bengals. Week before that, Kenny Pickett was extremely efficient en route to a win, and he's looked a lot sharper over the last, 2-3 week stretch than, of course, he did for the first week or so, where, he's turning the ball over like crazy. So I think a lot of people maybe remember those first 2 weeks and haven't seen them over the last 2 to 3 weeks, and I might be sleeping on the Steelers' chances because, like I said on the intro, you look at a lot of the sharps out there, a lot of the heavy money bettors, they're on the Steelers side of things here, and I will talk through a few reasons why. So first off, let's go through the injuries. Kylan Granson is doubtful, so likely going to be out for the Colts. He plays tight end, which means that Mo Alley Cox will be thrust into the tight end 1 role, and then you're going to have Jelani Woods playing backup tight end, but more than likely, the more receiving heady tight end in the red zone. He's shown a lot of that touchdown upside in the past, extremely athletic, big frame, also relatively fast. I think he's got a really, really bright future here in the NFL. He's going to see a lot more playing time because of Granson being out. So it doesn't seem like a massive injury, right? Just a $4,800 player, but it is going to open up a little bit of value. And though he's not listed on here, it was, marked out a few days ago, Jaylen Warren will not be playing for the Steelers. That will mean that Najee Harris gets at least 90% of the snaps at running back, likely 95% plus of the rushing load. But you do have a backup running back situation that's a little bit muddied. You had Benny Snell as the backup emergency back last week. I wouldn't be surprised if Anthony McFarland ends up being activated for this game. I would assume that Benny Snell is the backup. That's who I'm projecting as right now. But if the beat reporter comes out and tells us that it is in fact McFarland, do not be that surprised. He has been that guy in the past. He was drafted, I believe, 4 years ago by the Steelers in the 3rd round. So they do have draft capital invested into McFarland, but clearly he's practice squad, fringe, even rostered player at this point for the Steelers. Could maybe get that backup role. So we'll have to see. I'm assuming it's Benny Snell Jr. though. In terms of the top of our pool, we'll go player by player here. I'm definitely going to be on the Steelers side of things, right? We've talked about that to this point. I'm going to have a lot of 4-2 Steelers scripts, but most of my lineups are going to be 3-3s, and a couple of reasons why. The low point total, I think, is a little bit misleading. I think that both of these offenses should be able to get the job done tonight, particularly the Colts with their rushing attack. And that's really what has led them with this little resurgence over the last few weeks has been Jonathan Taylor. He's been a lot more effective. They've gotten him the ball a lot more often when they can, right when they're playing from ahead. And that's led to a lot of success. On the other side of things, I already mentioned that Kenny Pickett, right, is starting to look a lot more efficient. It just looks like a game where, I'm expecting 20 to 28 points scored by both teams. So I don't think it's going to go into the, high 50s or low 60s, but I could see it there towards the, 48, 50 point total, maybe towards the middle of the 50s if it gets a little frisky out there. And that's leading me to a lot of 3-3 stacks with both quarterbacks because they're both here in the 9K range. You have $9,800 Pickett, who also brings a bunch of rushing upside. So that's why I like him at the captain spot. But Matt Ryan at $9,600, if we're going to expect there to be maybe 50 total points scored, that's really going to lead us to both of these quarterbacks. So I do like getting to them. In fact, you can play both quarterbacks and still take a Michael Pittman or a Jonathan Taylor and round out that sort of lineup. So even though I'm heavy on the Steelers, it doesn't mean I'm not playing a JT. I'm not playing a Michael Pittman Jr. You can see they're still in my player pool. It's just that I like some of the Steeler players down here, considering price as well at the captain slot. Because if you take, let's say, a Deontay Johnson, a Pat Freiermuth at captain down here at just $6,400, $9,600 at the captain slot, like I said, you can take both quarterbacks and one of these top tier options. If you take a JT at captain, spend 17 grand, sure, he might end up being the top scoring player, but we're probably not going to be able to fit in all of those same players that we would have before. In fact, I can guarantee you won't, right? Because there's nearly an $8,000 difference between your captains. That's almost an entire spend up option just based on, the player that you're getting 1.5x on. So why not just take one of these mid-tier guys that still has that 15 to 25 point ceiling, hope that they end up scoring, 22 fantasy points. And, even if JT scores 28 fantasy points, he's probably not going to be the optimal if one of these guys scores one touchdown, 100 yards, or two touchdowns and just like 50 yards, that sort of thing. This is the guy you're going to have at the captain slot. And if I think this is going to be a competitive, little bit higher scoring game than the implied total would imply out there, then I'm going to be driven to some of these mid-tier options. So just to give you an idea, I do like Kenny at captain. So he's the one quarterback I'd take there because of the rushing upside. But I love Najee, I love Deontay, I love George Pickens. Najee Harris is getting a bunch of attention at captain, so he's the second highest owned captain on the slate at 14.5%. You have JT at 17%. That makes perfect sense. In fact, I think he could be even higher owned at captain, and I would be okay with playing him. So if you like JT tonight, you think the Colts are going to win. I have a Steeler jersey on from Pittsburgh, guys. I think you guys know who I'm taking tonight. But I would understand taking him at captain, right? He's that same sort of player. But I do like Najee Harris in a Pittsburgh heavy script. He's been getting all of the carries. Now Jaylen Warren is out of the fold, right? So that's an extra, 15 to 20% boost in terms of his snap share, which means rather than getting, let's say, 18 to 20 touches per game, now we're projecting him for, 22 to 25 touches per game, which doesn't seem drastic, but now he's projected for 17 fantasy points, right? 1.8x value. You can see in terms of points per dollar, that's a 0.2 higher than a Jonathan Taylor, which is pretty significant, right? In fact, Najee Harris is the highest owned of any, or say the highest points per dollar player of anybody in that elite tier range, right? You got to go the whole way down to a Pat Freiermuth to get a 2x player, which, by the way, if you get over 2x, that's when you're starting to look at some of the best plays on the slate when it comes to Showdown. Down low, you're going to get a bunch of really high numbers, right? Like 17 for Gunnar Olszewski, 15, nearly 16 for Steven Sims. That's because they're like $200, right? It's gets a little bit ridiculous down low there. But for terms of middle tier and high tier options, you're looking for guys that are at least 1.7x. That's where they become green on the sheet here. 2x is really where they become a near lock. So let's talk about Pat Freiermuth. Pat Freiermuth is a top 5 tight end in the NFL. I can just tell you that from watching him every single week. A lot of people have already caught on to that fact, and the rest of the NFL, the fantasy community, is probably going to realize it at some point too. And if he starts to get the type of volume that some of those top end tight ends, like, let's think of Darren Waller, right? Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, those sort of players, he's going to post that same sort of production. He makes people miss after the catch. He's an extremely efficient route runner. In the red zone, he's the most targeted player on the team, outside of Najee Harris, if you're including his rushing upside. But through the air, right, the most targeted player on the Steelers. And sure, their offense, the reason why his production isn't like those top 3 tight ends is because he's on the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's not on the Kansas City Chiefs. He's not on that Baltimore offense, right? He's not on the 49ers with a George Kittle. He's not even on the the Las Vegas Raiders, where they have a pretty decent offense too, right? Their defense needs a lot of work, but they can at least still score points. That's why he's not getting the, I think, recognition that he deserves. He's arguably the best player on the Pittsburgh offense. He's one of the best players on the team, period. Now, TJ Watt, right, a much better player. Minka, much better player. Cam Hayward on defense, probably a much better player. But on the offensive side of things, I think he's your alpha dog at this point. He's $6,400. He could score you 2 touchdowns. That wouldn't surprise me all that much. And he's only 8.2% at captain. He has to be my favorite captain on the slate. I'm going to have a ton of them at the flex spot. He's going to be a borderline lock for me on the slate. Like I said, when you get to close to 2x, up here above, at least in the mid-tier range in terms of your pricing, it's hard to come by. It's not going to happen very often in a game with right around like a 42 point implied total. Let's talk about the Steelers wide receivers. I like both of them, but kind of in different scripts. If I think it's going to be lower scoring, but the Steelers win, Deontay Johnson, because of his point per reception upside, gives them a lot of boost there. Obviously, on Draftkings to get a full point per reception. That's a huge deal when it comes to Showdown. Pickens, though, in higher scoring scripts is the guy that I'm looking for. He brings a lot more deep play threat, a much larger frame, capable of high pointing the football. If we're expecting there to be 50, maybe 55 points scored, which, I'm going to play a few game scripts tonight where I'm taking both quarterbacks, assuming it to be a little bit of a shootout, George Pickens could be that guy that gets you those 2 touchdowns, 100 yards, that sort of thing. So I like both wide receivers, kind of in different scripts there. Najee Harris, I'm not sure if I'm going to play, actually. So he's 14.5% owned. If he gets above like 15, 16%, I'm probably out on him. If people are going to buy in on the Steelers, I think most of them are going to assume that it's all Najee Harris. I'll just take a chance on wide receivers. So if he comes out of my pool, I'm likely adding maybe a Pittman, or maybe I'm going down here and adding a Paris Campbell to my player pool at captain, even from the Indy side. I don't love the idea of having to play 40% Najee at captain. That just seems a little bit too egregious to me. Outside of the last few weeks, Najee's been extremely inconsistent. Borderline dog shit to begin the year. People were calling for Jaylen Warren to start for the Steelers after like week 3. By week 7, they were screaming for Jaylen Warren. That's why you started to see him get like 35% of snaps. And sure, he's out of the fold now, right? It's the Najee Harris show at this point. He could still be, a yard and a half, 2 yards per carry. That's what we saw to begin the year, and completely tank your lineup at $9,400. So he's the one guy on the Steelers that I am worried about, and he's the highest owned player, right? 44% at flex, nearly 15% at the captain spot. I, as a Steeler fan, somebody that thinks that they win tonight, I don't know if that's worth playing. That's starting to get towards JT ownership, who I understand. There's a reason why he's projecting for that sort of ownership. He's on the quote-unquote, favorite team for Vegas there, and one of the best, if not the best running back in all of the NFL. Najee Harris has looked like, I'll just say, it looked like complete shit first 5-6 weeks of the year. So I worry about that, right? As someone that's seen him play every single week this year. Let's go into the value tier / middle tier defenses, kickers range, the good old Twilight Zone, I like to call it when it comes to Showdown, because any of these players could go off, right? Not any of them. We're going to talk about a few favorites, but the kickers, right? You could end up needing a kicker in your optimal. You might need a defense in your optimal lineup, right? It's hard to tell. It's a crapshoot, right? It's why the ownership on them is pretty much a crapshoot, right? Between 25 and 15% on all of the players there. So you can see I'm mixing in the Pittsburgh defense and both kickers. I'm not playing the Indy defense. I guess that's the homer in me, just hoping that they're not optimal there. In terms of my favorite players, though, it'd be like a Alec Pierce, right? So $5,200, a little bit cheaper than $5,400. Not projecting for crazy value, but 1.6, that's respectable. And if he scores a touchdown, right, he's going to spike his ceiling, right? 12, 13 fantasy points. And at that sort of level, he cracks the optimal lineup. He's going to score more than a defense. He's going to score more than a kicker, right? If he scores a touchdown, These are the sort of players that I traditionally like getting to. And on this slate, I do have to play kickers. I do have to play defenses. It's just, there's not many options here. Like, I like Alec Pierce, right? Going down to like the 3K range, I'm okay with Mo Alley Cox because of the injury to Granson. I love Jelani Woods. We'll get to him, right? But he's down at $1,400. So what? We got Mo Alley Cox here, and then we got Alec Pierce. Two players from Indy, right? There's not really a Pittsburgh Steelers player in this range. That's just going to lead me to a lot of these kickers and defenses, which I hate. You've probably seen me on the channel say it before. I hate getting to them, but sometimes you just have to, particularly if you're playing 150 lineups like I am. So that's the deal with them. I don't think I need to give them much more airtime. They're just a crapshoot. You play them in lineups, you get slight leverage to the field on them, and you hope you get it right elsewhere. That's honestly what I would recommend you do. You just punt them. You're not going to find a huge edge on the defenses and kickers. I can promise you that. Jelani Woods at $1,400. He might be the play of the slate, though. You can see he projects for 1.9x value, which isn't really the attraction for getting to him. It's the fact that he scored multiple touchdowns in 2 games this year. In fact, one of them, he absolutely broke a slate at tight end. People played him because you had multiple injuries to tight ends in front of him. And though it's just one injury, right, Granson out, it's not like Mo Alley Cox is... I mean, he catches touchdowns. We've seen him over the last 3-4 years, right? He can catch you that 5-yard touchdown. Jelani Woods can catch you a 30, 40-yard touchdown. He's got yard after catch ability, extremely athletic. And in the red zone, I'd much rather throw to a Jelani Woods than I would to Mo Alley Cox. He just brings a lot more upside to the table, has a much wider catching range than somebody like a Mo Alley Cox. I really like him here. I just like the talent, right? And he's $1,400. He's even cheaper, and he's coming in lower owned than a Mo Alley Cox. So just a lot of reasons I'm getting to him. Probably my highest owned value pick. We've got Ashton Doolin. He gets snaps for the Colts, so $400 if he's active. I could see playing him. Steven Sims, he's the returner for Pittsburgh. Also gets quite a few gadget plays set up for him, and he's only $200. So you hope that he takes one of those gadget plays for like 40, 50 yards, or returns a touchdown, gets into the optimal. Then Miles Boykin, kind of similar, except he's just like their number 4 wide receiver. And because Chase Claypool got traded, he's seen a lot more playing time. So, and by a lot more, I mean like 10% more playing time. So it's not like he's getting a bunch of snaps. But hopefully you could take one of those snaps for like a 30, 40-yard gain. Same thing there as a Steven Sims. If he can get you that splash play at that price tag, could end up in the large field optimal. All right, fellas, that is all I've got for the Monday Night Football preview. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead and smash that like button, but also go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any of the content in the future. We'll have a video dropping for Thursday Night Football, also for Monday Night Football next week, so you want to make sure you catch those. And if you want access to the projections that you saw throughout the video, make sure to check out my Patreon page. On there, I post all of my projections as they change throughout the day. When we get the injury report, obviously, ownership will change to reflect a lot of the news that drops. As industry sentiment changes, people are steamed up just before a lock on some of the really big shows. I account for that in all of my projections. So if you're looking for that direct access to use them in your optimizers, go ahead and check out the Patreon. But like I said, best of luck with any of your lineups for tonight, and let's get this cash, fellas.